Today on You're a Better Artist Than You Think, Why Brushes Matter, with the internet's favorite digital art brush builder, Procreate's Kyle T. Webster. I often hear this refrain that brushes don't matter in regard to digital painting. Early in my career, I have to admit, I also said those three words in that order on several occasions. And yet it didn't sound right in my head. And it didn't take me long to realize that I was just parroting something that I think in most cases is intended to mean something else. It's supposed to mean something that is true, but the phrase itself, brushes don't matter, is not true. Obviously, what people are trying to say is that brushes are not a substitute for practice, or brushes are not a replacement for rigorous artistic study, or brushes are not a replacement for artistic development or ideas or storytelling, right? But they do matter. Brushes matter to traditional painters. You'll hear them talk about the quality of the brush and how they also believe that a good painter can still do a good painting with a crappy brush, but it does matter. And so today we're inviting you here to discuss this idea that brushes do matter. And I thought I would begin by simply sharing an anecdote from my own career with you and just get your take on it. Hey friends, we'd like to take just a moment and invite you to join the Magic Box Brush Club at digitalartbrushes.com. There you can claim your 100% free lifetime membership to the Magic Box Brush Club and get new digital art brushes with accompanying tutorial guides every month for an entire year. Visit digitalartbrushes.com and join the Magic Box Brush Club today. If you like our show, please comment, subscribe, thumbs up, ring the bell, write a review, share with a friend, etc. Those efforts really do make all the difference in whether our show actually finds the artists and storytellers we're here to inspire and support. Thank you for listening. When I worked at Disney, I was perpetually the new guy. I was often the youngest on the team. I wasn't intimidated by that. I was curious, though, and so I would download the PSD files from the server, and I would turn the layers on and off and try to kind of do my forensic work to try to understand how these artists accomplished what they did digitally. My friend, my mentor, the person to whom I owe much of my career, Ryan Carlson, he would do these gorgeous visual development paintings, character paintings, also prop paintings and environment paintings, but he would do these gorgeous character paintings. And the workflow at the time was to render characters so that they looked like the finished CG model. And it saved us time and money because we could do a, albeit labor-intensive, Photoshop painting of these characters, but we didn't have to actually model it, surface it, add the hair, add the cloth simulations for the clothing, rig it, pose it, light it, render it. You know, it's easier and much more affordable to make changes to a Photoshop image than it is to make those changes to a fully articulated, complex, screen-ready character. And so I would especially fixate on these paintings by Ryan because they were just so subtle and intricate and convincing. You almost couldn't tell that it was a painting. You really would think this is just the rendered character. One afternoon, I think I'd asked him the third or fourth time, he just finally realized that he was going to have to give me a full tutorial so that I would stop asking.
Persistence pays off.
Yeah. I said, Ryan, I've been downloading your PSD files and combing through your layers and trying to understand your workflow. How do you do it? How do you get that level of subtlety in the texture, that level of subtlety in the lighting? How do you make the skin and the hair so convincing, the costume so believable? And then he kind of leans back in his chair. he gets this little sarcastic twinkle in his eye before he gives you a sarcastic answer. He says, it's just the correct hue, value, gesture, shape of brushstroke in the right place at the right time. I didn't realize fully that he was joking because I'm hanging on every word, trying, okay, all right, the right hue, value. Ryan, that's painting. You know, you're just describing painting. He said to me, Wednesday afternoon, we'll go out to lunch and we'll come back to the studio. I've got a wide open afternoon and I will sit with you in my office and I'll just walk you through the workflow step by step. We went back to the studio and sure enough, he sat there for about 2.5, 3 hours, just answering every single question I had and walking me through his workflow for achieving that subtlety in his character paintings. And there were a couple of major takes away there that were significant. One, for example, is turning on wet edges in Photoshop, right? That's a thing that is very brush specific that matters. And it was the secret sauce in so many ways for Ryan, who is, of course, a fantastic painter who knows how to put the right hue, value, gesture, shape, size, brushstroke in the right place at the right time. He does know how to do that. But to get that specific look, it required very specific brushes and brush settings.
Yeah. If you look at a Sargent painting, you have hard edges and soft edges. You have a big fat dab of paint in a specific shape that was made with a flat brush or a filbert or whatever, in order for him to be efficient in a way that gave him the results he wanted without fighting against tools or the medium, whatever. That all comes down to picking the right brush at the right size and then knowing how to use it. So it is crazy that people say brushes don't matter when obviously a huge part of making all the pictures we make is to fight as little as possible with the process.
You said that word fight.
Mm-hmm.
Art is often a struggle, and brush choice is a major antidote to struggle, whether the process is generally pleasant or generally frustrating. The brush choice can make such a difference.
Yeah, like
there.
A great example of that is there's a reason I've made over 50 pencils, digital pencils.
Right.
It's because I keep going after a certain feel. Some days I'll be like, I think I nailed it. And then a year later, I'll be like, nope, this is better. Yeah, there's a certain feel to tools we use that, and of course, it also comes down to the individual preference. So there are people I've talked to as recently as this year who tell me that a certain brush I made back in 2014 is still their favorite pencil to draw with or whatever. And I'm like, but it's terrible in my mind because it's not as well developed as stuff I did later when I knew more. For them, it just feels right and they draw best with it, so they're happy. These things matter.
You wouldn't bat an eye if you heard a traditional painter talking about their lucky brush or their favorite brush or their go-to brush or having a brush with a story or something. Why should that be any different for digital artists?
There's still that feeling of I make a mark, it feels a certain way. There's still the interaction of the surface, a tool interacting with that surface, and the individual artist's hand and whether they have a heavier touch or a lighter touch. And there's all these things that go into it. And one brush will feel great to one person, maybe not so great to the other. But I've had conversations with other people who've designed an entire book around just the way this one brush felt, or an entire editorial style for their illustration career around the way a couple of brushes felt.
I was wondering what your thoughts are on the role that brushes play in especially the beginning of an artist's creative growth.
I would never take a beginning student and ask them to go out and do some kind of exercise that involves transparent media with a micron Pigma pen. It's like, why would you then with digital art say, here's a hard round brush, do everything with this?
Right.
You're thinking through image making using a different vocabulary when you're doing different kinds of things. And if the brushes are helping you to use that vocabulary, develop that vocabulary, get results more efficiently, then I think you should be using those different brushes for those purposes.
Something I encourage my students to do is audition brushes. And I tell them, take time to go through that long mess of a brush list that you have. Find the ones that work for you, just the handful of brushes that work for you, make a list of those, and then delete the other ones. And you don't have to delete them permanently, but save them on your hard drive where they're not in your brush list.
Yeah.
Right? Would the equivalent be reasonable in a traditional studio? You open a drawer to get your most often used brushes, and you have to sift through 150 brushes that you don't even know where they came from. Random other artists just stopped by your studio and just threw them into your drawer,
That's so funny,
randomly.
But that's exactly what it's like with the digital.
I love it.
Yeah, it's funny. I downloaded these 6,000 brushes and they're all in the same place.
Yeah.
Why wouldn't you organize that mess?
It doesn't make any sense. And no wonder people get so frustrated and overwhelmed.
Yeah.
Pick the 4 or 5 brushes that really speak to you right now.
Yeah.
Make that short list and get rid of everything else.
Yeah.
And if you want to be a brush hoarder, that's fine. Just save them elsewhere. You're not having to say no to those forever. You're just focusing on these right now.
I've never heard Audition brushes, but that's totally the right way to think about it.
A lot of people now think of you as the brush guy, and for good reason. But you have established for yourself a clear and definitive personal brand twice over, not just once. A lot of people will do that once in their career and they're fortunate, but you've done it twice. Before you became brush guy, you were versatility guy. You were the guy who knew how to replicate any style. And as we've talked before, the latter was a logical extension of the former. Maybe you could talk to us about that and then share any thoughts you have on, and I'm kind of putting words in your mouth here, but I think it's a safe bet, how inextricable brush choice is from style.
Yeah, it's just essential to me to have certain brushes I do for certain things. It goes all the way back to when I was an in-house illustrator design firm, and we would have to present different ideas quickly to clients for various projects. I could just have literally one idea, but draw it 3 different ways. But then when I started my illustration business, it also allowed me to function like a mini illustration agency where rather than have this one way of working and really hammer on that and hope that I could get a lot of work and have a sort of look that was the Kyle look for how things are drawn, I was instead going complete opposite direction, just saying, no, I want to make things look completely different for different clients, for different moods, for different projects. It just seemed to me like it'd be great if I could illustrate packaging for some like scented candle that was all floral and pretty and like watercolory, and then turn around and do like some heavy metal album cover that was super dark and heavy and like
bats and skulls.
Right. I wanted to be able to do all these things and have it look like different artists had done it, which is not to say I was like trying to say, look, it looks like Brad Holland. No, I wanted it to look like stylistically really varied. So yeah, the brushes were essential to that and made it so much easier. I don't think I could have done it otherwise. It just wouldn't have been possible, especially because I was working 100% digitally. Anybody out there who's working on commercial stuff these days, you're pretty much working digitally because clients always have changes. It depends on the job, but there are people out there like Greg Manches who will paint stuff, Tim O'Brien, but a lot of times I think the kinds of work they're doing requires very few changes on the back end. But the kind of work I was doing required like constant iteration and changes. And so, yeah, it all made sense. And so then that became my whole thing. You can hire me to do whatever, and I can probably take care of it. And if I can't, I'll tell you.
Why did you care so much? Nobody develops the breadth of work, let alone the breadth of styles that you developed without really caring.
When I was drawing as a kid, I never did develop a sort of like easily identifiable visual voice. I was just looking at so much different stuff and I liked so much different stuff. And I was just copying from everything all the time. And I never really stopped doing that. And in college, since I had a fine art education, which was literally just like drawing naked people for 4 years, I wasn't developing any kind of visual voice there either. I was just trying to get good at drawing the figure and, doing the still life paintings and everything else we had to do in the studio. So then when I went to work at this agency, it got even worse, if you want to use that word, because I immediately was required to make things look a billion different ways. It was a really small firm, 6 people when I joined, and anytime they needed any kind of illustrated solution to something, it was on me, and it couldn't look like the last thing we did all the time. So that just became my habit. And then honestly, it's fun to experiment. It's fun to challenge yourself to work in different styles. I'm not saying like I can do anything, but I think it helped me get my first and only picture book published, which was because I showed some sample art to David Saylor at Scholastic, and it looked nothing like my editorial work. And that was like a win, because he had explicitly said, it can't look like the stuff I see you doing for the Washington Post or whatever, because that's not picture book work. Also, you mentioned the brushes being part of the whole process. Yeah, if I make a brush and I can only make certain kinds of marks with it, it forces me to work a certain way. And like I was mentioning earlier with limitations, that then helps me to develop new looks and new approaches and things like that. Sometimes they go nowhere, and sometimes they become something, and I might use them for an assignment, you know?
Style is defined by its limitations just as much as it is defined by its possibilities.
For me, for sure, yeah.
What's an example of a time that a brush unlocked something for you stylistically?
I had to do a season of posters for 2 seasons, actually, or was it 3? Wake Forest University Theater, back where I used to live in North Carolina and Winston-Salem. The brief said we need a poster for each play, and we want each of them to be completely different stylistically. They cannot look like the same person did them. That was actually part of the job. 12 posters, and none of them looked at all alike. And the brushes made that so easy. There was one for Macbeth I did that was super painterly, and I was just using some mixer brushes, really big fat ones. But that's one example. And then, of course, I mentioned already the picture book. I literally had like 4 or 5 brushes that were for this book. So it is consistent. And so it forces me to work a certain way.
Right. Yeah. So that was also increasing your employment options.
Oh, yeah. I do not think I would have had the length of illustration career that I had before I joined Adobe. I don't think I would have made it that long as an illustrator, as my life expenses continued to like double and triple every year with having children and
Right.
all the other things that come with, getting older. So it was because I was able to take so many jobs from so many different markets and just kind of be a bit of a chameleon. At some point, you realize you're not as good as certain people are who have one style. I looked up to people like Gary Kelly when I was in getting started. Absolute genius.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
But I think I quickly realized that I like to draw. I'm pretty good at drawing. And I'm pretty good at like mixing it up and doing certain things just well enough to get work. But I'm never going to be like celebrated for having this one way of working, because I'm just not that good. And that's okay.
I think part of it too is making peace with not caring about that as much as definitely caring about something else. There are lots of different ways to make art and lots of different ways to be employed making art. You just have to be honest about that and get cool with it eventually.
Yeah, totally fine with that. And the brushes too, like brushes for me are the one thing that I can literally just sit down and start making brushes and I'm in 7th heaven. I don't know why. I have no idea why that's interesting to me, but it just is.
Ours is not to reason why, but to make brushes and paint. Let's talk about workflow. Now, this gets confusing because style and workflow, they're inextricably linked, but we'll do our best here to try to compartmentalize. So when we talk about style, of course, we're talking about the aspect of the art that people see. We're talking about aesthetics, we're talking about influences, the immediate visual message of the art. When we talk about workflow, we're shifting focus to how it was actually created. Something I'm always trying to urge my students to do is practice their workflow just as much as they practice style and technique, because workflow is so underrated. The ability to say, yes, I can have that done by that deadline for that price, and to know that you're not just saying, I guess I'll figure it out,
right.
But like you actually know this is within a half day or so how long this is going to take to do the thing.
Mm-hmm.
And not to sound crude, but part of it is really your own step-by-step process.
Mm-hmm.
It really is. This is how I create a piece of viz dev art in that style for that studio's aesthetic, or this is how I create a page of my graphic novel. And I've got that down to this type of brush makes these types of marks. Maybe that's the block in, or maybe that's the polish, whatever it is, that's the brush for that stage. What insight can you provide for us about the role of brush choice in the step-by-step process of workflow?
When you're sketching, having the right brush selection is going to allow you to more quickly get the idea down on the quote unquote canvas. If I have these big fat rectangular brushes where I can not only just knock in some shapes in perspective to suggest what's happening with buildings, if I also have a brush where I can literally just go line by line and paint in some windows because it's equally spaced rectangles, and I can also then quickly distort it with a transform tool, then the brush becomes this huge part of that process that's going to save hours. For my picture book, again, having certain brushes that I was using for painting just the sky that were larger and had more texture, less texture, or whatever. And I could just quickly go boom, boom, boom. Here's a cloud, boom, 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 and not be painstakingly like, I'm going to draw an outline. I'm going to fill it in, like it just has to be part of the process if you want to work efficiently on a deadline. And it's not the same thing as an artist who's like, painting for themselves.
Yeah.
It's just not the same thing.
You mentioned there the fluidity of the sketch process. So maybe that starts to become more of a one-to-one. Okay, if the process is more fluid, then maybe I'm looking for a brush that behaves with more fluidity.
Another thing we haven't talked about, I can't believe I didn't mention this earlier, is the speed factor. If you have an iPad, not a cheap thing, don't get me wrong, but a lot of people do actually have one anyway. It's there. The real investment then is the pencil. Procreate's like, what, $10 or something? And then you have thousands of brushes you could download, buy, use the ones that are in the app, blah, blah, blah. If I have a brush that I can just dab, 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 splat, then here's this playground. And you could do whatever, hundreds of paintings in a week. So what? There's no cost for the experimentation. So I think that speed factor is huge. And painting with oils and watercolors that don't need any drying time. It's not the same. I know it's not the same. It is fun to use oils and watercolors, don't get me wrong. But if you want the look and you also want to just keep on moving.
Of course.
Totally. Kyle, what is some of the best advice you've ever received?
Ooh, holy cow. I have so many, gosh, there are too many things. I would say in college, the first professor I had for drawing and who I'm still friends with today, anytime I was doing something that wasn't quite, what it should be, he would always just say the same thing. He'd just come by and be like, fundamentals. And he wouldn't elaborate. But I knew every time, it's like, why isn't this working? If something isn't working, it's always a few basic things you're just not doing. And you just go back, you step back, and you look at the basic stuff, and you go, all right, I know why this isn't working. That was good advice. But I could probably list a billion other things people said to me.
Does that still ring through your brain sometimes when you're working?
Of course,
like fundamentals.
From that moment on, anytime I'm doing something and I get frustrated or stuck or blocked because it isn't looking good, it's obviously one of the few things. There's not enough contrast. There's too much contrast. There's not enough variety in the edges. There's too much. There's no focal point. There are too many focal points.
Yeah.
It's always the same stuff.
Simplicity is very, very underrated.
And difficult to achieve.
Oh, so difficult. What is some of the worst advice you've ever received?
I was a member of this website Draugr back in the 2008, 2009, 2010. And there was this chat room where just the members could chit chat and stuff. And there was a guy there who said to me, you should do something else. He called me what was the word? It was working man's something artist, just good enough to do the really low level grunt work. He was super well revered in the Senate. But what it did was it just motivated me to prove him wrong. And so I think it was right around that time I started getting regular work for big publications and all of them, because I just was like, oh yeah. And so that was a pretty tough thing.
Yeah, it's always tough, especially when it's those people who are kind of respected in whatever space that you're in, like in this case, that chat room, but sometimes it's a convention, sometimes it's, other places. And when people who are in power offer something up like that, it can be so soul-crushing for young
Yeah, I've met a lot of
artists.
people who have had somebody who's accomplished and done well say to them, I don't think this is for you. And they've stopped. And of course, they regretted it. But I will say, I think those people are the minority. I mean, the ones who say things like that.
Oh,
People I've met
yeah.
in this industry are encouraging and they share and they're helpful and they want everyone to do well. So this is a rare thing.
Whenever something like that comes up, I always think of this scene in the TV series Mad Men.
I like that series.
There's a character named Megan who Don Draper, the protagonist, is married to, and they live in New York. And then Megan moves out to the West Coast, to Los Angeles, to pursue a career in acting. And she's starting to have some success, but at the same time, she's making some decisions that Don, and I think a lot of people would perceive as not being the healthiest decisions. And then Don flies out to visit her, and he's having a bad time at work. You know, he's used to being the best at everything and the number one guy. He's having a hard time at work. And then she's having all this success. She's meeting all these important people and she's getting all these opportunities. And then they have an argument one evening and he latches on to the unhealthy decisions that she's making instead of seeing the bigger picture of all the good things that are happening too. And he gets really paternalistic with her and kind of starts scolding her.
Sounds like Don Draper.
Yeah, and saying basically it's not as good as you think it is, and really gaslighting her in a lot of ways. She looks at him and she goes, "It's so easy when it's someone else's life."
Oh,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I remember the moment I heard that line, and I just went, "Damn right, Megan, damn right." You know, that's it,
Yeah.
right? It is just so easy to go, "Sorry, kid, you're not cut out for it."
Yeah.
You know,
yeah.
it's just so easy when it's someone else's life to just say, "This is the way things should be. This is how you should be. These are the decisions you should be making." That's the easy part.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, anyway, didn't stick.
Yeah.
I'm glad it didn't.
Me too. Me too. Oh my God. What
Yeah.
if, right? What if?
Who is your favorite Muppet and why?
Oh, okay. Now that's hard. I love the Muppets. I love the Muppets. I grew up with Sesame Street, watched all the Muppet movies, several in theaters, like when they came out, like way back.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Holy cow. But here's my answer, and this might not be that exciting, but I love Kermit. And
Oh, yeah.
partly because one of my favorite songs ever written is the song Why Are There So Many Songs About Rainbows? Because if you just strip away Jim Henson doing this funny voice of Kermit, that's just a great melody. It's a beautiful piece of writing.
Oh, yeah.
Mhm.
It's just a beautiful song. So I love that. But also I have this really sweet memory of him riding a bike in the original, I think it's the
Oh,
original
yeah.
Muppet movie. And it's just this shot, this long shot where you see him and he's just riding across.
Yeah.
Head to toe.
And
Yeah.
even as a, like, whatever I was, 4 or 5-year-old, I don't know how old I was, kid, seeing
Yeah.
Kermit on a bike, I was old enough to understand that was magic. Because I'm like, wait, where's the puppeteer? How are his legs moving?
Yeah.
And so I just have this really, really clear, amazing memory of this moment and all the things it did to my brain and just loving Kermit. And also it's the simplest thing. I mean, it's just a green.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah. I love his design.
It's crazy. And his eyes crack me up. But they're also like, how are they
Oh,
expressive
yeah.
when they don't move?
Right?
Yeah. Jim's hand. Yeah, and Kermit's sincerity, he's just doing
Yeah.
his best,
Yeah.
and he doesn't want to hurt anybody's feelings, and it's only when he's pushed his absolute limit that he flies off the handle.
Yeah, it's awesome when he loses it. It's just the best. And also when he's frustrated and the mouth goes like,
Uh-huh.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah.
I love Kermit.
Last question, Kyle. Our podcast art for the show is an elephant holding a feather. This is, of course, a reference to Disney's Dumbo. In the movie, Dumbo has a magic feather that he holds on to in order to fly, but then later realizes that he could fly on his own. What is your magic feather?
Oh, that's a great question. You'll have to allow me a second to think about that one.
Oh, no problem.
Everybody takes like 5 minutes.
Well, I did have something just pop in my head. I guess it's related to the thing earlier about somebody telling me that I wasn't cut out to do professional illustration. I think many of us who are creative people or working in the arts or wanting to work in the arts or who like to perform in some way or draw or make music or whatever, you are oftentimes, I think most of us are seeking validation. We're looking for approval from loved ones, but also from strangers. Probably around my first midlife crisis, I was able to settle into this idea that there's just one thing I've always liked to do with my time more than anything else, which is to draw. Generally to make stuff, but more than anything, I think just to doodle and draw. And that it is okay that if I'm doing it, I'm not getting that feedback all the time from someone somewhere saying, that's good, you should keep doing it. It's more like, good or not, clearly this is good for me. It's good for me to do this for my health and my longevity as part of this process of me continuing to make stuff and draw and continue doing that in my life. There was this thing of like, also, as soon as it's done, look what I did. You know, when you're young, it's your parents or your friends. And then when you get into the business, it's your coworkers, it's the people who are reading the magazine you drew something in, or whatever it is. But I think, you know,
The transaction.
right. And now, I think if I were alone on a desert island, if I could eat and live, I would also just draw.
We're your hosts, Chris Oatley
And Veronica Kosofsky. Our production coordinator is Mari Gonzalez Curia.
and this show is made possible by the Magic Box Academy.
Subscribe to this podcast on any of the major platforms: Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Audible, YouTube.
And join our email list at magicboxacademy.com for notifications about future episodes, courses, and mentorship opportunities.
Get new digital art brushes with accompanying tutorial guides every month for an entire year with your free membership to the Magic Box Academy Brush Club. Join today at digitalartbrushes.com.
And until next time, friends, remember, you're a better artist than you think.